Welcome to the Tucker and Crowley Report. We're part of Belmont Journal and News Now. I'm joined by Franklin Tucker, editor of the Belmontonian. I'm Mike Crowley, and we also have State Senator Will Brownsberger and school committee candidate Angus Abercrombie with us today. So we've been experiencing the dedication ceremony for the new Belmont Middle and High School building. Will, let's start with you. What are some of your thoughts about the new building? And we certainly appreciate having you here today.
Well, thanks, Mike. It's just great to be in this building. This building reflects people working together. People are working together in a sustained way over decades. Right now in the world, we see so much conflict. We see so many examples of people not working well together. This is an example of people working very well together. The whole community coming together to get this building done.
It's so well said, Will.
Yeah, just a word about the building itself. This is a great success. Something that the building committee has always said is that it's on time and on budget. Do you think that this could help in terms of people's maybe being less reluctant to vote for an override?
Well, I would hope so. I think it's certainly an example of the town getting things right, and that's great to see.
Mm-hmm. Well, the facility is primarily a school building, but I know that many people in the community look at this building as a facility that can find other uses. Great auditorium, just an amazing space. And as you look across this building, so many great spaces in the building. Any thoughts about how the community might be using the building in the future apart from education?
Well, look, I think the educational use is the central use. I think, making sure that our kids for several generations hence, have the facilities they need and the environment that's really going to foster collaboration. I think that's what this is all about. It's amazing, I think, how well thought out this building is to foster a collaborative learning approach. And so I think that's the number one use, but I am sure that there will be sufficient additional community uses that people are going to have a 100% sense of ownership of this building over the years to come.
Since we have you here, what are your priorities up on Beacon Hill for this year?
Great question. I'm personally focused on the issue of building energy conservation. Mm-hmm. The challenges we're looking at in reducing our carbon emissions from the building sector, residential building sector. So that's the area I've chosen to make a deep dive in because I think it's one of the hardest areas actually in our whole greenhouse gas emission program. So I'm not quite sure what that's going to lead to. But let me tell you where I do think it leads to. I think it leads right into the central challenge of building more green housing. We have to address the barriers that we find in many communities to building more housing and building more affordable green housing. So that I actually think right there in that sense is kind of the central conversation of the next decade or so, is to open up the spigot so we can start building housing across the state, because the shortage of housing is really a critical problem. And representing Belmont, where we have a lot of housing and people are feeling good in their housing, it's easy to miss the problem. But as I now represent a lot of Boston, I represent a lot of kids that are just cannot afford the housing they're in, and they're leaving. And that includes my daughter. Lived in Fenway and then 3 different apartments in Brighton. Finally moved home. Finally moved to Maine. Mm-hmm. Because you just can't afford living here, and that's not something we want. It's sustainable for us in the long run if we're going to be a vibrant economy in this state.
I do want to ask you, Will. This building is designed with a number of green energy types of features, including solar panels. Is there a greater role in the state for standards that would ensure that new public buildings are built with sustainability features going forward?
I think there is, there's a lot of talk of that, of leading by example, and I think we want to do that. And so a lot of the new buildings really are great. The real problem we have is the old buildings. I mean, let's talk about the State House. Let's not talk about the State House. There's so many old buildings that it's really hard to make them efficient. We don't even really have the technology to make them efficient because it's just the retrofit is impossible.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Will. Let's turn to Angus Abercrombie. Angus, you were a student here.
I spent 1 year in the new building after a year and a half in the old one and a year and a half of a pandemic.
Tell us your thoughts about the building and just how different this is as a space for students and how much better than what you experienced before.
Well, it's just an entirely different atmosphere. The level of light coming in and collaborative spaces and just a general sense of openness and excitement that when you come in the door you experience in this building. When you look at the old school, it was tired, and everyone in it was tired. And so really that just did not lead to a good learning environment, and it didn't lead to the best educational outcomes. But I have to say that the most important thing, having this new, larger middle and high school building, is having the staff to fill it and make sure that we're getting the most out of it.
So 3 or 4 of us are really old, but Angus, you're here and you have this, the state senator next to you. What kind of question would you, as a younger person, like to ask Will Brownsberger?
Well, I should note that Senator Brownsberger gets his fair share of questions from me. I think I had an email into him earlier this week about the new gun bill that's going through the State House at the moment. But, frankly, I think the number one thing I'd just like to ask Senator Brownsberger is, when we look ahead to the next decade and to decades beyond, how is the state going to be able to really facilitate a response to climate change that preserves the opportunities that it has come to harbor over its, centuries of existence?
Give me that again.
What are we doing about climate change, Will?
Yeah, a lot. That's the story. The short answer, if you want to frame a short question, the short answer is not enough, and to do enough is going to be a lot harder and a lot more expensive than people have really grappled with. I think every region faces its own challenges. I think New England faces some special challenges with lack of onshore wind, lack of a lot of solar, and at the same time, really significant winter heating needs. And so we have our own hills to climb, which I think are a little steeper than some of the regions have. And so I think we're really struggling. I really don't think we're on track to hit the goals we've set for ourselves. And I think everybody who's close to the numbers feels that way. And the question is, how can we accelerate it? And the answer to that question is it's not easy. So I am hopeful in the long run. And what I'm really hopeful for, I don't mean to be a pessimist about the world when I talk about being pessimistic about hitting some of our goals. I think that we're going to have to adapt, and that's going to be our challenge. We're going to have to keep fighting to control climate change. Eventually, we're going to get it under control, but we're also going to have to be about adaptation, and we can do that. That's what humans are good at.
So, Will, you have a new candidate who is running for his first townwide elected office. Any advice to this young man?
I think he's doing a good job listening to a lot of people, and that's job number one.
Sounds great. You have to go?
Thank you.
All right.
I do. All right. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Take care.
Angus, I do want to ask you, as a declared candidate for school committee, we're here in this new middle and high school building that's just an amazing facility, and yet the town is struggling with finding the resources to pay for operating budgets. I want to know what your thoughts are about the school budget and how we can ensure that we're making good use of these facilities for the benefit of the students going forward?
Well, I want to start by saying, when you look at our school budget, since I entered the Belmont Public Schools to where we are now, in real terms, our per student spending hasn't changed, but global standards for education absolutely have. So we need to keep looking at how we can better fund our schools, making sure that every student has the opportunities that they frankly deserve in our community. You know, we have classes of students, I think I was just talking about the 7th grade, being unable to go on field trips, not because we didn't have a lot of potential grant funding to get them out to where they want to go and give them the learning opportunities, but because we don't have the staffing in our buildings to deal with that kind of disruption. We need to have room for error and room for opportunity in our buildings and in our staffing, and we don't have that right now. So that's going to come down to revenue. Frankly, we need an override next year. I won't be the first person or the last person to say that, and I hope that voters are willing to listen and put that forward. But we are also doing so much work beyond that. I've filed one petition this year to move to a appointed board of assessors, which will allow us to have a more collaborative finance team in town, and also get to work on programs like senior tax relief, so that as we have to ask more of our taxpayers, we aren't hurting some of our most vulnerable residents. So there's a lot that's going on the revenue side, and hopefully we won't be asking for too many massive overrides over the next decades, but that's where we are right now, and we really need them to be able to provide the kind of opportunities that our students deserve.
One thing about the school committee is that it really is a policy-making body. What are some policies that you would like to see in the schools?
Well, for one, we need to re-examine where we are with recess. That was one of the few disappointments that I kind of felt in this new building, looking at the middle school side, is where are those students going to go play when they have that opportunity, and also where in their schedule do they have that opportunity? You know, the opportunity to get outside and move around is a lot more significant to a student's education than a lot of people think. We talk a lot about classroom time and making sure that every classroom has the staffing and materials that it needs to succeed. But so much of the time outside of classrooms, be it on your way to school, making sure that we have adequate busing services, safe opportunities for students to walk and bike to school, and generally getting students out of cars, to issues like recess. Those kinds of things are really my focus, because I went through them, and it's work that I've had conversations with our administrators and with the school committee members about those issues when I was a student, and now I'm ready to have those conversations from a slightly different perspective, but really bring the same energy.
All right. Thank you, Angus. And now I want to turn to Franklin and a quick sports update.
That's right. If you weren't there because it was rainy and misty, Belmont played Woburn in football. So it's a team that we barely ever win against. But we did. Belmont came out ahead. I believe it was 43-35. It was a great victory for the team. It's now 4-3. It's going to be going into the playoffs, or it's pretty much secured their way into the playoffs. And it's a great testament to the coaching staff and the students.
All right. Thank you, Franklin. And I want to thank Angus Abercrombie again for joining us today.
Thank you.
You can find more of Franklin's reporting at Belmontonian.com, and be sure to tune in next time, and we will see you then.